Ladies and gentlemen, this article came out on Vice. U.S. military could collapse within 20 years due to climate change report commissioned by Pentagon says. So, wow. So I guess as climate change is unfolding, the U.S. military is going to have to make some changes, because they are going to be impacted by it. So what do you mean? So according to a new U.S. Army report, Americans could face a horrifically grim future from climate change involving blackouts. And I just heard from the True Royal family that some people are going to be getting their power cut off. So these things are going to become the norm. Disease, thirst, starvation, and war. The study found that the U.S. military itself might also collapse. This could all happen over the next 2 decades, the report notes. The senior U.S. government officials who wrote the report are from several key agencies, including the Army, Defense Intelligence Agency, and NASA. The study called on the Pentagon to urgently prepare for the possibility that domestic power, water, and food systems might collapse due to the impacts of climate change as we near mid-century. The report was commissioned by General Mark Milley, Trump's new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, making him the highest ranking military officer in the country. The report titled Implications of Climate Change for the U.S. Army was launched by the U.S. Army War College in partnership with NASA in May at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. The report was commissioned by General Milley during his previous role as the Army's Chief of Staff. It was made publicly available in August via the Center for Climate and Security, but didn't get a lot of attention at the time. We don't think about that. We don't think about these power outages even impacting the military, but how would it not impact them? That is definitely something to pay attention to. Two of the most prominent scenarios of the report focus on the risk of a collapse of the power grid within the next 20 years and the danger of disease epidemics. That's right, because they said those ice sheets actually holds a lot of the diseases on the planet. And as they melt, those diseases from the past that we haven't seen in a long time could come back. Both could be triggered by climate change in the near term, it notes. The report also warns that the U.S. military should prepare for new foreign interventions in Syrian-style conflicts triggered due to climate-related impacts. Bangladesh, in particular, is highlighted as the most vulnerable country to climate collapse in the world. The permanent displacement of a large portion of the population of Bangladesh would be a regional catastrophe with the potential to increase global instability, the report warns. This is a potential result of climate change implications in just one country. Globally, over 600 million people live at sea level. That's right. And as the ice sheets melt, some of those islands, people are going to have to get off of those islands because they're going to be lost to the water coming on land. Sea level rise, which could go higher than 2 meters by 2100, according to one recent study, will displace tens of millions of people, creating massive, enduring instability, the report adds. Right. And you know what? You got to also think about what kind of impact is climate change having on some of these military bases around the country. You got to think about that. The US should therefore be ready to act not only in Bangladesh, but in many other regions, like the rapidly melting Arctic, exactly, where the report recommends the US military should take advantage of the hydrocarbon resources and new transit routes to repel Russian encroachment. But without urgent reforms, the report warns that the US military itself could end up effectively collapsing as it tries to respond to climate collapse. Well, then how do you respond when you got a president that's saying it's not real? He said climate change is not real. Wow. It could lose capacity to contain threats in the US and could wilt into mission failure abroad due to inadequate water supplies. Total collapse of the power grid. The report paints a frightening portrait of a country's falling apart over the next 20 years due to the impacts of climate change on natural systems such as oceans, lakes, rivers, groundwater, reefs, and forests. Current infrastructure in the US, the report says, is woefully underprepared. Most of the critical infrastructures identified by the Department of Homeland Security are not built to withstand these altered conditions. Well, I tell you what, we already know in our state that the power grid is old and it really needs to be brought up to date. Many of them are around the country. And they're right, that could be a huge problem, which means people can be without power. If these power grids finally do collapse, people could be without power for months, even years, before they get this stuff back up and running. Some 80% of US agriculture exports and 78% of imports are waterborne. This means that episodes of flooding due to climate change could leave lasting damage to shipping infrastructure, posing a major threat to US lives and communities, the US economy, and global food security, the report notes. So they're showing, I wanted to look at this chart. They're showing all of the services that can be impacted if the power grid goes down in this country. So you have communications, water, banking, finance, oil, gas, government services, electric power, transportation, and emergency service. And they're saying they're all interconnected. So the power grid going down would have a domino effect on all of those services. And that's damn near everything, isn't it? A lot of the things we definitely depend on, that's for sure. Okay, so they're saying if the power grid infrastructure were to collapse, the United States would experience significant loss of perishable foods and medications, which means loss of life, because there's a lot of people that are taking perishable medications. Loss of water and wastewater distribution system, loss of heat, air conditioning, and electrical lighting systems, loss of computer, phone, and communication systems. Wow. So that would include things like airline flights, satellite networks, and GPS services. Loss of public transportation systems, loss of fuel distribution systems and fuel pipelines, loss of electrical systems that do not have backup power. Wow, that's a lot. Shoot, you might as well say if we lose the power grid, America collapse, period. It's going to collapse at that moment. Although the report does not dwell on the implications, it acknowledged that the national power grid failure would lead to a perfect storm, requiring emergency military responses that might eventually weaken the ability of the US Army to continue functioning at all. Relief efforts, aggravated by seasonal climatological effects that would potentially accelerate the criticality of the developing situation. The cascading effects of power loss would rapidly challenge the military's ability to continue operations. Wow. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? That right there is showing all of us that this country ain't ready for this type of disaster at all. They're not ready. America's going to fold if the power grid goes down. They're not ready for this. And they certainly have not prepared the citizens for a collapse of the power grid either. Some of these folks would damn near collapse right along with the power grid because they won't know what to do and will find it very hard to take care of themselves and their families. And you really got to think about this. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Can you live off the grid? If everything turned off across America right now, would you be able to survive? You need to ask yourself that question. And it's a very critical question because it's not out of the ordinary. Look, this past summer, just from the heat wave, we lost power. And people were without power for a few days from the heat wave. So you now got California that's switching power off and have done it already in the past. Millions of people without power. Are you ready for something like that? And if you're not, you got to get yourself ready. And make sure if you're out for a few days, even a few months, you'll be able to make it. Oh, wow. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.